Hello there, and welcome to the next of our videos talking through the Power and Conflict poems. This is the Emigree by Carol Rumans, relatively recent poem written in 1986, by the end of which I hope these three images are things that you might be able to associate with some key quotes and ideas from this poem. So what happens in the Emigree? Now, the Emigree is a complicated poem, and if you're gunning for a higher grade, you really might want to gain a confident understanding of it. Basically, a woman remembers the city in which she grew up, and which she has had to leave because it seems that a dictator, someone who wasn't voted into office, but someone who's taken power by violence or by threat, has taken over that country. And the more time goes by, the more she remembers how wonderful her home country was, even though she knows she's starting to exaggerate and it wasn't really the paradise she makes it out to be. At the end of the poem, it becomes clear that those who've stayed in that country see her as a traitor now for leaving, but nevertheless she doesn't want to return. She'd almost prefer to remember the ideal city in her memory than she would to go back to the real one. A reading of the Emigree is quite a brief poem, follows just for you to remember it. There was once a country, I left it as a child, but my memory of it is sunlight clear, for it seems I never saw it in that November which, I am told, comes to the mildest city. The worst news I receive of it cannot break my original view, the bright filled paperweight. It may be at war, it may be sick with tyrants, but I am branded by an impression of sunlight. The white streets of that city, the graceful slopes, glow even clearer as time rolls its tanks and the frontiers rise between us, close like waves. That child's vocabulary I carried here, like a hollow doll, opens and spills a grammar. Soon I shall have every coloured molecule of it. It may by now be a lie, banned by the state, but I can't get it off my tongue. It tastes of sunlight. I have no passport, there's no way back at all, but my city comes to me in its own white plane. It lies down in front of me, docile as paper. I comb its hair and love its shining eyes. My city takes me dancing through the city of walls. They accuse me of absence. They circle me. They accuse me of being dark in their free city. My city hides behind me. They mutter death, and my shadow falls as evidence of sunlight. Here are then some key ideas, and they are complicated ideas for this poem, that will help you talk about Rumans and what she's trying to do in a more sophisticated way. The first Emigree is someone who leaves their home country to start a new life elsewhere, someone who emigrates. Notice that this has a double E at the end, which means the person who's emigrated is a woman, and that is significant. So if you could read through these, you have a space in your booklet to write a sentence about each, showing how they relate to the poem. The first one's been done for you. The poem is about a woman who is an emigree from her home country. So pause the video and have a go at that. Secondly then, here are some quotations that hopefully should be useful to understand and to use in the exam. The first one, the opening line, we always start with, there was once a country, I left it as a child. So this is from the semantic field of fairy tales, words that we associate with fairy tales. There was once a prince, you might say, there was once a princess. So by saying there was once a country, it sort of shows she knows this is make-believe. The country she's talking about, she can't even really remember. The pronoun I left it as a child, perhaps shows that she feels guilty because it was her who left it, not it that left her. And as a child, again, shows she's not had any experience of this country for a long time now. She seems to be an adult, and the whole of the poem is only based on memories. A key image here is I am branded by an impression of sunlight. Now a brand is something, a piece of metal you heat up and then you push against the skin of, for example, an animal, and it leaves an impression on the skin, a scar, permanently. So the adjective branded shows how violent and painful it is to be from that country. She feels it will be part of her forever, like a scar. The symbol of the brand also shows it's permanently there. She's been away for a long time, but she certainly feels like she's from that country still. And this natural imagery that recurs throughout the poem, sunlight, branded by an impression of sunlight, is a very positive image. Everyone loves sunlight. Light is associated with hope, perhaps even with God, the light of the Lord. So maybe she associates it as with a kind of paradise. However, this is a poem about power and conflict, and this key image, time rolls its tanks, and then some enjambment, and the frontiers rise between us. So this is personification. Time can't actually do anything, but time is like a dictator or a warlord here. It rolls its tanks, it causes her to be separated from her home. So it's certainly portrayed in a very evil way. These symbols, the tanks, they can be a symbol of how the action of time can cause suffering. They might not be real tanks. They could just show how time is as violent as any kind of military machine. And the personification, the frontiers rise, of course borders or frontiers don't rise on their own, shows how people in power have put a barrier between her and her home. It's nothing to do with her, it's as if they kind of sprung up on their own. So all of these images add up to show how she's now isolated from her country by those in power. And this final line, we always look at the final line, my shadow falls as evidence of sunlight. This seems a lot more negative. The symbol, the shadow, could represent something. A shadow has connotations of things getting worse. You could say someone is a shadow of what they once were. So maybe she sort of deep down knows that this country isn't what she remembers anymore. The verb falls also has associations that are negative. Someone falls in a battle, it means they're dead. So it's a very negative final line with all of this imagery. Finally, this noun, the last noun, evidence of sunlight. Why would you need evidence? So perhaps this shows that she's desperate to prove she was even there. The people in power have changed this country so much, she needs evidence that it was this wonderful place she remembers. So hopefully if you're making revision cards, then these are some lines that might help you to compare this poem to others. And if you're gunning for a higher grade, a complex image you might need to want to think about is the child's vocabulary I carried here like a hollow doll. Now again, this is another ambiguous image. The adjective child is innocent. She was too young to understand what was going on, and so maybe we kind of forgive her for having this unrealistic idea of her home country. But the adjective child is also naive. It shows ignorance. So does she know deep down that her attitude to home is childishly simple and that in reality it's probably awful there? The adjective hollow is also potentially negative. It could mean meaningless. Somebody leads a hollow life, then it's not worth living. So her memories are futile as the country has been transformed. Perhaps she knows this whole poem has been hollow. And the simile, like a hollow doll, which has assonance, it has that R sound in a lot, almost like it's echoing and empty, shows the unreality of her memories. It links back to the first line. Dolls are a childhood image. There was once is a childhood construction. Perhaps she knows that this should be put behind her now. It's a childish way to look at a complicated thing. I hope that was useful, and do check out the rest of these videos, please.